Let's summarize the immune system so it's clear in our heads exactly how it's broken down and what we're talking about when we're talking about the different components. The immune system is the body's defense mechanism. It's the body's defense mechanism. And generally, it can be split up into two separate parts. Now, the first of these is immunological, which involves, on a cellular level, different cells and different responses. And then we've got the non-immunological component, which is on a larger scale, more to do with the tissues and the organs of the body. First of all, we want to look actually at the non-immunological part, which can further be split up into physical and functional barriers. And we've got our biological and chemical barriers too. So let's take a look at the physical and functional barriers. First of all, we've got the skin. Now, you might not have thought of the skin as being part of the immune system, but it is because it's a physical barrier to microbes entering the body. And there's two main ways that it does this. One is you've got keratinocytes, which are the cells in skin, and they regularly shed. So there's regular shedding of the skin, and that obviously takes off any microbes on the surface. And as well as that, the keratinocytes have these tight junctions between them called desmosomes. Now, desmosomes, when the cells are tightly joined together due to the desmosomes, this is going to stop any microbes and pathogens going into the skin and into the body. Secondly, you've got mucus. Now, mucus is found in the mucous membranes, obviously, which is different openings within the body. And it's also found in the lungs. So let's draw some lungs here. Now, how does it work in the lungs? Well, mucus is a sticky substance, and in the respiratory system, it's produced by cells called goblet cells. So, if you imagine this as being the epithelial layer within the respiratory system, you've got a thick layer of mucus on top of this. And the epithelial cells have these small projections called cilia. Right, let's write that down, cilia. These cilia beat multiple times every second, and they essentially act as a brushing the mucus up the respiratory system and out of the body. And other ways that the body can get mucus out of the body, which has pathogens stuck to it, is through coughing and sneezing. Then you've got the urinary system. Now, specifically for the urinary system, we've got the complete emptying of the bladder, so complete emptying of the bladder. And how does that stop the microbes from causing disease? Well, it stops colonization of those microbes because they're constantly being emptied out of the body. And then we've got the flow of urine, the one-way flow of urine through the urinary system. And obviously this stops any microbes going up towards the kidneys and stops any infections being caused that way. So let's take a look at the biological and chemical barriers. Well, what have we got? We've got low pH. And where is this low pH found? Well, firstly, it's found in the stomach. In hydrochloric acid. So, if there's any microbes that are ingested into the body, they're likely going to be killed through the very acidic environment of the stomach, usually a pH of 2 to 3, depending on the stage that the stomach is in. And there's another area which has low pH in the body, and that's the vagina. So that's also going to stop any microbes and organisms from colonizing that area. The second biological and chemical barrier we've got is sebum. So let's talk about sebum. It's produced by sebaceous glands on the skin. So it's found on the skin, and it has this particular chemical component to it which stops any microbes from growing, and specifically any bacteria and fungi from growing. And it also makes the skin slightly acidic, right? So it lowers the pH down a little bit, making it hard for microbes to grow. Then we've got the normal flora of the body. Now, what is flora? Well, flora is bacteria found on the body. And why would the body have bacteria? These are harmless bacteria, which essentially compete with pathogenic bacteria, meaning harmful bacteria, for resources, and therefore inhibit and stop the growth of bacteria which are going to cause disease within the body. The last biological and chemical barrier we've got are tears and saliva. So both of these produce something called lysozyme, or contain something called lysozyme. So lysozyme is an enzyme which is involved in breaking down the cell wall of bacteria. So it essentially kills bacteria. As well as that, we know that tears obviously through the process of blinking, wash and cleanse the eye. And saliva, similarly, cleanses the teeth and the mucous membranes of the mouth and related areas. So that's the non-immunological side of the immune system. Let's take a look at the immunological side of the immune system. And we can see that this is further broken down into the innate immune system and the adaptive immune system. Now, whilst we've categorized these in two separate immune systems, we'll actually draw a little bridge between them because they're actually linked. And whilst there might be certain separations between both, they're actually joined, and there's a lot of processes that happen in between both. So the innate immune system, this is the first part of the immune system that's activated. And this part usually occurs generally within minutes or hours. So minutes to hours, right? So this is the first part that's activated. And this generally has four main parts to it. The first of these is phagocytes. And an example of a phagocyte that you may have heard of, which is an immune cell, is a macrophage. That's a macrophage. Now, phagocytes are a group of immune cells. And what they do is they take in the pathogen and essentially ingest it and digest it. Okay, so they take it in, they digest it, and essentially destroy it. So that's what phagocytes do, and they're part of the innate immune response. Next, we've got lysosomes, which are a cell organelle, which contains, as we know, we talked about it when we were talking about tears and saliva, it contains something called lysozyme. Lysozyme. So that's an enzyme which is responsible for breaking down bacterial cell walls and essentially helping kill bacteria. Next, we've got complement, which is a group of over 20 different proteins, right? So over 20 different proteins. And these proteins essentially have different functions between the innate and the adaptive immune systems. One thing that it does is it signals to the phagocytes exactly where the pathogens are. So it acts like an emergency torch and essentially draws in the phagocytes towards the area. It also activates B cells, so it also has a role with B cells, and it binds to bacteria and essentially makes holes in their cell membrane. And lastly, we've got natural killer cells, or NK cells, and these, as the name suggests, directly kill the bacteria. So that's the innate immune system. Next, we've got the adaptive immune system, which takes place over a slightly longer period of time, usually about 7 to 10 hours, or even sometimes days. So a longer process. Now, this can be split up into two further parts. So we've got the humoral response, and we've got the cell-mediated response. The humoral response involves B cells, right? And now when these guys are activated, they mature into something called plasma cells. That's plasma cells. And these plasma cells produce a well-known substance called antibodies. And antibodies are a form of receptor which essentially identify the pathogen and label them and then end up being responsible for their destruction within the immune system. Then we've got the cell-mediated response, which involves T cells. And when we're talking about T cells, we've got two main types. We've got CD4 cells, also known as helper cells, T helper cells, and then we've got CD8 cells, which are known as cytotoxic T cells. And as the name suggests, the cytotoxic ones are the ones that are involved in killing the pathogen. And that's a quick summary of the immune system.